Hi everyone, I want to talk to you today about summarizing and responding so that you feel comfortable writing this section of your paper. So before we begin, make sure you have read the D2L reading from They Say, I Say, and you also might want a refresher on the article, The Real Problem with Lunch, just because it will be referenced in this video. If you're ready to begin, let's start talking about summarizing, or the chapter Her Point Is. So one of the main ideas that we take away from the They Say, I Say reading is that writers who make strong claims need to map their claims relative to those of other people. So what we're saying here is that anytime you're reading something and doing a summary, anytime you're summarizing, you have to realize this is in terms of a larger and broader conversation. So anything that you're reading and writing is relative to all of these other ideas that are out there on this same topic. My example to you would be go to Opposing Viewpoints, right? Click on that social media section, and you saw hundreds of articles out there on the viewpoints part of social media. So it's important to keep this in mind. Anything that you're working with is going on in a larger conversation that's taking place. Another point that stood out to me is that as a general rule, a good summary requires balancing what the original author is saying with your own focus. So you are in the driver's seat in your paper that you're writing. Everything is in light of how you are approaching it. So it's good to remember that you want to make sure that you are keeping that author's original intent intact, but you also want to do so, or may even come at it with your own sort of emphasis or focus that you have. So anytime you summarize, you would write the summary different from someone else in the class. In a minute, you're going to see a summary of the article, The Real Problem with Lunch. How you write that summary might be different because certain things may stand out to you more than someone else, and that's going to be okay. There's another idea here that really is important when writing a summary, which is preventing bias. So anytime you are writing a really good summary, as they say here, you must be able to suspend your own beliefs for a time and put yourself in someone else's shoes. You have to hold back, especially if you're reading something you disagree with. When you are putting out there the author's original ideas by summarizing and telling your reader, telling your audience what they said, it's very important that you come at it from a very neutral standpoint. If you are summarizing and you are snapping judgment at someone in the summary, I'm not going to trust the rest of your own work because I know that you were not able to put your own ideas aside in order to be fair to what the author was originally saying. When you're writing, you also want to make sure you remember the rules of good writing. You want to avoid any kind of list summaries. So writing a good summary means not just representing an author's ideas and views accurately, but you're doing so in a way that fits your own writer's voice, your own essence that you're putting out there. So it still has to hold those ideas of good writing. Don't just read a list. Lists are very boring. Don't just write a list. And then, of course, make sure you're utilizing signal verbs. You don't want everything to just be saying the author says, she states, she says. You want to make sure you have some nice variety there. So here's an example summary of the real problem with lunch. I'm going to read it to you just really quickly. In the article, The Real Problem with Lunch, Bettina Siegel takes a stab at people who scoff at America's school lunches. All right, there's the main idea. Siegel, who has reported on school lunches for 6 years, claims that American school lunches cannot be directly compared to those of other countries, such as France, because the problem is bigger than the lunchroom itself. In fact, Siegel asserts that the issue is the overall food culture of our country rather than wastefulness or mismanagement. One of Siegel's most compelling reasons for her claim is that students' eating habits do not allow for better school lunch. Siegel reminds readers that students are not primed to eat healthy meals. As Siegel explains, school-aged children's diets focus mainly on pizza, bread, soda, and sports drinks, and swapping out foods for healthier options would likely result in lower student participation in school food programs, driving these programs into the ground. All right, if you look at some of the yellow here, you'll see some of those signal verbs or lead-in phrases that kind of help us understand and see what the author was saying. It's very clear here who's saying what. It's very clear in this paragraph that everything mentioned comes from Siegel's perspective. I have let the reader know that. I've also let the reader know where I'm getting my information from. It's very clear because I've clearly stated the article title and I've clearly stated the author. We always refer to authors by their last names in a piece. All right, and you can see that there. Okay, let's talk about responding. So this is from the chapter yes, no, okay, but. All right, so there are many, many ways that you respond to others' ideas, but from they say, I say, the three most common and recognizable ways to respond to an author is to agree with them, to disagree with them, or some combination of both when you're reading some sort of opinion or argumentative piece. So it's always good to not just go into your response by, as I say here, launching directly into massive details, but just slow down a minute. Be very clear and state, I agree, I disagree, or use some sort of combination of those. And they give you some formulas there in the textbook so that you're really clear about where you stand. So as they say, I say, disagreement can pose some hidden challenges. You have to do more than just simply assert that you disagree. You have to offer some clear reasons why you disagree. So that's going to help shape the body of your paragraph or paragraphs. When you agree, you also have to do more than just say, I agree. It's kind of like a really terrible discussion board post when someone just says, I agree. So even as you're agreeing, you got to bring something fresh to the table. You can add to it and make sure you show, as a writer, you are a valuable participant in this larger conversation that's going on here about the topic at hand. And be aware that whenever you agree with someone's view, you're disagreeing with someone else. So if you want to, that's a really good way to develop some content. Anytime you agree, envision who you're disagreeing with. That'll give you some ideas of what to write about. All right, another aspect we like about this option, what they're talking about here is agreeing and disagreeing simultaneously, is that you can tip subtly toward agreement or disagreement depending on how you feel. So again, it's okay to sort of agree with someone or sort of disagree. That's going to be fine as long as you're very clear about where you stand. And that goes back to point 1 on this slide. Here's an example response from The Real Problem with Lunch. Okay, I'm going to read it very quickly. Siegel accurately analyzes the problems with America's school lunches, and I agree that students' eating habits complicate our country's ability to serve healthier food options. For one, I have seen students' eating habits through my children's school experiences and know that our children are bombarded with unhealthy choices, whether through the school itself or from their own parents. For example, my daughter's class has community snack time in which each parent is assigned a week to bring the class a snack. The snack time process does not allow for fresh fruits or vegetables, and even if it did, I doubt there would be a change in snack choices. In fact, one day my daughter described her snack as a bag of potato chips, which is not an option I would have personally given her at home. Couple this with a constant reward for good work or behavior, and my daughters have eaten a variety of suckers, donuts, and candy all before 2:30 dismissal. Were the cafeteria to serve choices like those of France, it is unlikely our children would make choices for health and personal growth. They, as Siegel says, are inundated with junk food options and advertising and are ingrained in a food culture that does not promote health. A change in school lunch would mean a shift in culture, and that is no easy task. All right, so one thing I wanted to point out here, first of all, is that it is very clear that the writer agrees with the author and their point at hand. So before we launch into the reasons why, there is a very clear sentence here that there is agreement going on. The tactic used here is a fresh perspective through personal experience. This is a great way to add to the conversation. It's a personal experience that's offered as proof that this is something that is true. It's also very clear in the piece where the author's ideas come into play, and this is noted by using the author's last name as an indication of that. So Siegel accurately analyzes, and then later as Siegel says. So it is given credit where it's due, and it's made very clear. All right, just a few things about response. So when you agree, you can point out some unnoticed evidence or line of reasoning that supports the author's claim that they haven't mentioned. You can cite a personal experience or a situation, maybe even a hypothetical, that also adds to the author's view. You can also remember that you're agreeing with, when you agree with somebody, you're disagreeing with someone else out there in the world. To disagree, make sure you give reasons, a specific reason why you disagree. Make sure you, it says do the duh move by disagreeing, not with the position itself, but rather with the assumption that it is maybe new. Maybe it's like all right, well, the author didn't really do anything new here. You can do a twist it, agree with the evidence, but disagree. Let's see, agree with the evidence, but twist the logic so the evidence actually supports your own stance. So take kind of use stuff that they give you against the author here. And don't forget that you can do both. Just be very clear about how you're doing it. So although I agree up to a point, or I'm of two minds because. So the main lesson here is that you can agree, you can disagree, or you can do both. Just be very clear on what you're doing.